I hadn't heard from Ethan in 6 days. Not a single message, not even a missed call. The silence felt like punishment, though he never said he wanted to hurt me. The last time I saw him, he stood by the window, listening while I confessed everything. My hands shook, my voice broke, but he just stared outside as if waiting for the sky to change color. When I finished, he only said, "I need space." Then he picked up his jacket and left. I thought he'd come back after cooling off, that maybe my honesty would save us. I was wrong. On the second day, I started calling his friends. Everyone said the same thing, they hadn't seen him, hadn't heard from him, assumed he was just taking a break. On the third day, I drove to his office, but his desk was cleared, files gone, and his computer wiped clean. I told myself he'd return when he was ready, but a strange panic built inside me, something that wasn't just fear, it was guilt manifesting into suspicion. By the fifth day, I couldn't stand the silence anymore. That's when I called the investigator. His name was Miles Carter. His voice was steady, professional, and unnervingly calm. I told him I needed help finding my missing husband. I avoided the word runaway. I gave him Ethan's photo, his car details, and a few addresses. I didn't tell him the truth that Ethan knew about the affair, that his disappearance wasn't random. But Miles was observant, he didn't need me to say it. His eyes stayed on me longer than they should have when I stammered through answers that he asked when I last saw Ethan. "A week ago," I said. "What happened that night?" "Nothing unusual." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" I looked down, pretending to adjust the strap of my purse, but the question pierced right through me. I mumbled something about an argument, about him being distant for months. The truth clawed at my throat, but I swallowed it. I wasn't ready to admit that the argument wasn't about dishes or work, it was about betrayal. Miles started his search immediately. He said he'd call with updates, though I could tell he didn't expect miracles. I spent hours pacing the apartment, replaying memories that no longer felt real. The smell of his coffee mug, the dent in his pillow, the faint outline of his shoes by the door, ghosts of an ordinary life that had collapsed overnight. I told myself I cheated because I felt invisible. That's what I believed when it happened. Ethan worked late, spoke little, existed beside me rather than with me. I mistook neglect for rejection, and a moment of attention from someone else felt like oxygen after years of holding my breath. But the moment I confessed, everything inside me turned hollow. I expected shouting, anger, maybe tears. Instead, Ethan's silence was worse. It told me everything I didn't want to hear, that he had already stopped loving me long before I gave him a reason to. Miles called on the sixth day. He said Ethan's car was parked outside a motel 2 towns away, abandoned but clean. He checked the room records. Ethan had stayed one night and left before dawn. The clerk said he seemed calm, not running from anything, just done. He withdrew a small amount of cash, canceled his cards, deleted his social media. It was all deliberate. I asked if there was any sign of where he went next. Miles hesitated before saying he didn't want to be followed. That night, I sat in the dark and stared at my reflection in the window. I wondered what kind of person drives their husband to vanish. The reflection didn't answer. The guilt settled in my chest like a second heartbeat, steady and suffocating. I kept thinking of the way he looked at me that night, neither hate nor sadness, just quiet recognition. As if he'd finally seen me for what I was. Miles came by the next morning. He handed me a folder with notes, maps, and timestamps. His handwriting was neat, clinical. But there was something in his tone, curiosity, maybe pity. He left on his own, he said. No signs of distress. No one forced him. I nodded, though my throat tightened. So he's alive. As far as I can tell, Miles said. Then he added, almost like an afterthought, he's choosing not to be found. The word stayed with me long after he left. Choosing not to be found. It wasn't that Ethan was missing, it was that I was no longer someone worth returning to. I thought about calling him one last time, just to hear the empty tone on the other end, but I didn't. I realized that what scared me most wasn't that he was gone. It was that he might never have planned on coming back at all. By the seventh day, I understood something I'd been avoiding since the moment I hired Miles. I wasn't searching for Ethan, I was searching for proof that I hadn't destroyed everything beyond repair. Every lead, every phone call, every desperate question, I was hoping for a sign that he still cared enough to leave a trail. But he hadn't. He erased himself cleanly, efficiently, as if love had been a chapter he simply chose to close. When Miles called again that evening, I answered before the first ring ended. His voice was low, steady. "I found something," he said. My breath caught. "Not much, but I think he wanted to be found. Just not by you." The line went quiet after that. And for the first time since Ethan left, I stopped hoping for his return. Because if he didn't want to be found by me, then maybe the only thing left to discover was why I needed him to be. Miles's words wouldn't leave my mind. He wanted to be found, but not by you. It looked like static in my head while I stared at Ethan's empty side of the bed. The sheets were cold, the scent fading a little more each day. I kept the phone close, hoping for a call, but every vibration was just another reminder that it wouldn't come from him. Miles sent an update the next morning. He'd found security footage from a bus terminal 2 hours away. Ethan looked calm, carrying one small bag, wearing the same jacket he'd worn that night. No rush, no panic, just quiet intention. Watching it hurt more than any confrontation could have. I'd imagined him angry or broken, but he looked free. When Miles called later, his tone was careful. "There's more," he said. "He paid cash, used no ID. But someone at the terminal remembered him. Said he smiled when he bought the ticket." I didn't know what to say. The image of Ethan smiling while leaving me felt crueler than any argument. I wanted to ask where he went, but instead I asked something else. Did he look alone? Miles hesitated, then said, "Yes. Alone, but certain." That certainty tore at me. I kept thinking about the night I confessed. How I'd expected some dramatic collapse, a reaction that would let me feel punished enough to move on. Instead, Ethan's calm made me feel invisible. I thought honesty might buy forgiveness, but now I see I was only trying to clean my conscience, not repair what I destroyed. Miles came by that afternoon. His eyes studied me the way someone examines the aftermath of a storm. "Clara," he said softly, "I need you to tell me the truth. What really happened before he left?" His tone wasn't accusing, just tired. For a moment, I wanted to keep pretending, but the lie had started to rot. "I told him," I said finally. "About the affair." The words sounded smaller than the guilt behind them. Miles didn't flinch, didn't judge. He only asked, "Why now?" I told him I couldn't carry it anymore. That I thought confession would save what little was left. He nodded, almost understanding. And instead, he disappeared. I nodded too, unable to meet his eyes. For the first time, the silence between us didn't feel professional, it felt personal. Miles sighed. Sometimes people disappear not because of what was done to them, but because of what they realized about themselves. I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew he was right. Maybe Ethan didn't leave me to escape pain. Maybe he left because staying meant living beside a version of himself he no longer recognized. A day later, Miles said he'd traced Ethan's next move. A bus ticket to a small coastal town, rented cabin under a different name. The locals knew little, he paid cash, kept to himself. Miles went there, and when he came back, his expression was unreadable. He handed me a small notebook. Inside was a single note Ethan had left at the cabin desk. The handwriting was familiar, careful. "If she looks for me, tell her not to. She's already found what she wanted." I read it over and over until the words blurred. Found what I wanted. Did he mean the affair? Or freedom? Or punishment? Miles didn't say anything, just watched me with quiet sympathy that felt unbearable. I finally whispered, "He hates me." Miles shook his head. "No. Hate leaves a mark. He left nothing. That's worst." That night, I sat with that thought. I'd spent so long defining myself by the pain I caused that I forgot he could simply choose indifference. There's no closure in that, only emptiness. I kept waiting for anger, for him to demand explanations, but maybe silence was the only revenge he needed. The following morning, I called Miles again, pretending it was about another lead, but really I just wanted to hear a voice that knew the story. He didn't sound surprised. "You don't want me to find him anymore, do you?" he asked. I stayed quiet. He continued, "You're looking for permission to stop feeling guilty." His words hit harder than any proof he could have shown me. I wanted to deny it, to insist I still cared about finding Ethan, but the truth was uglier. I didn't want Ethan back. I wanted absolution. The kind that comes when someone else says you've suffered enough. But Ethan wasn't going to give me that. He'd taken away even the comfort of punishment. Later, Miles told me he'd found one more trace, a bank withdrawal from that same town, made 3 days ago. "He's alive," he said simply. I exhaled, but the relief didn't feel like relief at all. It was just confirmation that he existed somewhere I could never reach. Miles lingered by the door before leaving. "You're not the victim in this story, Clara," he said quietly. The words hung heavy in the air, undeniable. I wanted to defend myself, to say I'd only made one mistake, that I was human, that people forgive worse things. But he didn't wait for excuses. He was right. After he left, I sat alone for hours, staring at the notebook. The last thing Ethan had written replayed in my mind like a heartbeat I couldn't silence. "She's already found what she wanted." Maybe he wasn't being cruel. Maybe he meant the truth, that what I wanted was to feel something, even if it destroyed everything else. For the first time, I realized Miles hadn't been hired to find Ethan. He'd been hired to find proof that love was still salvageable, that my sin hadn't erased my worth. But every discovery only led back to the same place, me, standing in the wreckage I created. That night, before going to bed, I asked myself a question I'd never dared to before. If Ethan suddenly knocked on the door, would I even deserve to open it? The answer came quietly, the same way he had left, without noise, without drama. I wouldn't. When sleep finally came, it was heavy and restless. In my dreams, Ethan wasn't angry or sad. He just walked past me without looking back, the way people do when they've already said everything that needed to be said. And when I woke, I understood what Miles meant. I wasn't the victim. I was what was left. The morning Miles returned, the air felt different, still, expectant, like the pause before a confession. He didn't say much when I opened the door. He just handed me an envelope, yellowed at the edges, my name written in Ethan's handwriting. I didn't move. My fingers traced the letters as if touching them could bring him back. Miles only said, "He left it for you," and quietly stepped aside. I didn't open it right away. For days, I'd begged for answers, but now that one waited in my hands, I was terrified to read it. I asked if Miles had read it. He shook his head. "It's not my truth to read." Then he left. The door closed behind him with a sound that felt final. When I finally tore the seal, the paper inside smelled faintly of salt and rain. His handwriting was calm, unhurried, as though written long after the storm had passed. "Clara, by the time you read this, you'll have already looked for me. Maybe that's what I wanted you to do. To see how far guilt can take someone before they realize it's themselves they're chasing." My throat tightened. I kept reading. He wrote about silence, the kind that grows between people who stop listening. He said he'd known about the affair weeks before I confessed, that he'd seen the guilt in my eyes, heard the hesitation in my voice. "I didn't confront you because I wanted to see if honesty still meant something to you. When you told me, I realized it did, but too late for us." I read the line 3 times, each word cutting cleanly, without cruelty. Then came the part that broke me. I'm not leaving to punish you. I'm leaving because I can't keep pretending love is something we can patch back together with guilt. You were brave enough to tell the truth. I'm only being brave enough to leave it behind. Tears blurred the ink, but I kept going. You always said I never showed emotion. The truth is, I stopped feeling it around you. Not because of you, but because of what we both became, people waiting for each other to change. Maybe this disappearance is the only honest thing I've done in years. The letter wasn't long, but every sentence felt deliberate, measured, final. It ended simply, I hope you find peace, not me. You deserve to start over. We both do. Goodbye. I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. There was no anger, no begging, no accusation. Just quiet acceptance. I realized then that he hadn't disappeared out of hate, he'd vanished out of mercy. He'd chosen freedom over a lifetime of pretending. And somehow, that hurt more than any revenge ever could. I called Miles later that evening. My voice was hoarse. He's not coming back. Miles didn't ask how I knew, he must have heard it in my tone. You read it, he said softly, yes. Do you feel better? I thought about that. The truth was complicated. No, I said finally. But I understand now. Miles didn't reply for a few seconds. Then he said, understanding is what comes after punishment. It's the part that lasts. He offered to stop the case, to close it officially. I agreed. There was nothing left to find. That night, I reread Ethan's letter. The words didn't sting anymore, they just existed, like proof that once, something real had lived between us. I folded it neatly, placed it in a glass jar, and lit a match. The paper curled, blackened, turned to ash. I watched it until nothing remained but gray dust. When the flame died, I sealed the jar. Not as a keepsake, more like a burial. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I looked around and noticed how empty everything felt, but it wasn't the same kind of emptiness as before. This one was cleaner, lighter. There was no waiting, no pretending. Just truth. Brutal, but freeing. For the first time in weeks, I opened the window. The night air was cool, almost forgiving. I whispered his name once, not as a plea, but as a goodbye. The echo disappeared into the dark, and for a strange moment, I imagined him somewhere far away, maybe by the sea, reading something new, smiling in that calm way of his. Not thinking of me. And that was okay. As I turned off the lights, I realized I'd been chasing Ethan not to find him, but to find the version of myself I'd lost somewhere in the wreckage of our marriage. The woman who thought love meant being chosen, even after betrayal. The woman who couldn't bear silence because it sounded like judgment. But now, the silence didn't accuse me, it simply existed. I lay in bed and closed my eyes. His words echoed softly in my mind. I hope you find peace, not me. Maybe that was what forgiveness really was, not getting the person back, but finally understanding why they had to go. Before sleep took me, I whispered one last truth into the darkness. I hired someone to find the man I lost, I said quietly, but what I found was the truth I'd buried. My voice didn't tremble this time. It was steady, final. When morning came, I didn't rush to check my phone. I didn't wait for a message that would never come. Instead, I poured coffee into one cup, sat by the window, and watched the light fill the room. For the first time, it didn't hurt to be alone. Ethan was gone, but the truth remained, and in some strange, painful way, it set me free. I had broken something that could never be fixed, but maybe that was the point. Some stories aren't meant to end with forgiveness. They end with understanding, and as the day began, I realized Miles had been right. I wasn't the victim. I was what was left. And maybe, finally, that was enough.
It's strange how easily pain becomes routine. Months passed, yet I still woke up beside Imran every morning, exchanged the same words, played the same roles. The world saw a normal couple, but what they couldn't see was the quiet fracture underneath. We didn't argue anymore, that part of us had burned out. What remained was civility, empty, careful, and cold. He still asked how my day was, and I still answered, both of us pretending those words meant something. There was no rage, no tenderness, just two people surviving the ghost of a marriage. Sometimes, in those quiet mornings, I'd wonder what would have happened if he hadn't said those words that night. Maybe I would have kept believing we were fine, that silence was normal, that love didn't need to be spoken to survive. But he'd wanted truth more than peace, and truth, once spoken, doesn't vanish. It lingers, reshaping everything around it. He got the honesty he wished for, but it took everything else with it. Ryan had disappeared from my life completely. I deleted his number, blocked his messages, erased every trace of him. It wasn't anger, it was survival. I couldn't carry his presence while trying to fix what was left at home. Not that there was much to fix. Imran had forgiven nothing, but he also never punished me. His silence was punishment enough. He became a stranger who spoke my language but didn't share my life. Sometimes he'd stand by the window at night, lost in thought, and I'd see the faint reflection of the man I once loved, the man who used to talk about dreams, not experiments. But that man was gone. I started noticing the small ways he distanced himself. The way he'd plan trips alone, attend dinners without mentioning them, forget anniversaries that once mattered. He wasn't cruel, he was indifferent. And that hurt more than anger ever could. Anger means there's still fire left. Indifference means ashes. I tried to reach him once, told him I wanted to start over, to forget everything. He just looked at me with quiet exhaustion and said, "You can't forget what you chose." There was no hate in his tone, only truth. And I couldn't argue with truth, not anymore. Nights became the hardest. Lying beside him, I'd stare into the dark, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, wondering if he still thought of that night, of what I did, of the man whose name I'd never say again. Sometimes I'd wish he would ask, scream, accuse, anything to break the stillness. But he never did. His restraint was its own kind of cruelty. It made me realize he no longer needed to understand. He'd already accepted that we weren't the same, that we never would be. I began to withdraw in my own way. My silence became a mirror of his. I stopped waiting for forgiveness and started living with absence. I filled my days with work, distractions, meaningless tasks that gave the illusion of purpose. The only thing left between us was the shared understanding that love, once fractured by choice, never returns whole. It becomes something else, something polite, quiet, and impossible to repair. One evening, we were sitting together after dinner when he finally spoke about it, not in anger, but in reflection. He said, "Do you know why I asked you that question? I wanted to know if honesty could survive desire." I looked at him and said softly, "And did you get your answer?" He nodded. "Yes. It can't." He said it like a conclusion, not an accusation. Then he got up, walked away, and left me with those words echoing in the air. That was the last real conversation we ever had about it. Time dulled the pain but never erased it. We learned to exist beside the truth, to carry it like a scar we both pretended not to see. Friends still admired how composed we seemed, how steady, how perfect. They didn't know that every smile was rehearsed, every gesture measured. We had built a fragile peace, not out of love but out of exhaustion. It was easier to stay together than to face what being apart would expose. Sometimes, I still catch him watching me, but it's not with love or anger, it's with quiet remembrance. as if he's looking at someone who once meant everything but no longer does. I know that look because I see it in myself too. We became two versions of the same loss, living proof that some wishes should never be spoken aloud. That I don't blame him anymore. I understand now that what he asked for wasn't betrayal, it was clarity. He wanted to know what would happen if truth had no boundaries. He got his answer, and I got mine. Truth can destroy faster than lies ever could, because lies at least protect the illusion that love is still alive. Truth tears that illusion apart, leaving nothing to hold on to. Now, when I think of him, I don't feel hatred or regret. Just acceptance. We both made choices we can't undo. His wish, my yes, our silence, it all became one story that can never be rewritten. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I whisper into the dark, we did it. We told the truth. And look where it brought us. My husband once said he wanted honesty more than anything. What he didn't realize was that honesty is rarely gentle. It doesn't heal, it exposes. And once it does, there's no going back. So we live now, side by side, polite strangers bound by a secret wish that neither of us truly wanted to come true. The truth set us free, but it also left us with nothing to hold on to except the memory of what it destroyed.